Every morning, you worshipped his face on millions of cereal boxes. The ultimate American golden boy. But that cheerful cardboard smile masked a terrifying reality. While the nation ate breakfast, looking at his picture, the biggest heartthrob in the country was starving. Riding a cramped train to his own Hollywood premiere, his stomach twisted in agonizing pain. America's invincible idol sat gripping exactly 35 cents in his trembling hand. The intoxicating illusion of the Hollywood machine is masterfully designed to deceive the human eye and manipulate the public consciousness. We are conditioned by the media to believe that the blinding flash of a photographer's camera and the hysterical roar of an adoring crowd are undeniable indicators of immense personal wealth and supreme security. The American dream promises us that if your face is universally recognized, if your name is written in towering neon lights, your pockets must logically overflow with untouchable riches. But the closely guarded reality of the entertainment industry is that massive fame and actual financial fortune are frequently separate, disconnected entities. Sometimes, the most recognizable human being on the planet is also the most vulnerable, trapped permanently inside a glittering cage where the walls are made of pure gold, but there's nothing of actual substance to consume inside. To truly understand the psychological torture of the Hollywood studio system during its golden age, you must step away from the artificial studio lights and step onto a heavy, rumbling passenger train bound for an anticipated red carpet movie premiere. This locomotive was a rolling, high-speed palace of mid-century luxury, designed exclusively to transport the elite of the nation. The long train cars featured polished mahogany wood and plush velvet upholstery. The air inside the private passenger cabins carried the aroma of imported cigars and the sweet scent of custom-blended perfumes worn by the powerful industry executives on board. From the opulent dining car situated down the narrow corridor, the elegant sounds of crystal glasses clinking in celebration, and the rhythmic scraping of silver cutlery against imported china echoed through the train. Waiters, dressed in crisp white tuxedos, expertly balanced silver trays, loaded with prime cuts of roasted meats, savory sauces, and towering sugar desserts. It was a moving monument to excess and untouchable success, carrying the most valuable human commodities of the entertainment world directly toward their next publicized triumph. Sitting quietly in the corner by a pristine glass window in one of the most expensive luxury cabins was the beating heart of this entire traveling circus. He wore a meticulously tailored custom suit that hugged his broad athletic shoulders perfectly. His styled hair and striking globally recognized jawline caught the warm, golden light of the cabin interior. To any casual observer walking down the carpeted hallway and glancing past his open door, he looked like the flawless, invincible deity they paid money to see on the silver screen every weekend. He looked like a man who owned the world, a man who could snap his fingers and have any human desire magically fulfilled. But looking past the manufactured million-dollar smile and peering deep into his eyes, you would not see the quiet comfort of a secure movie star. You would see the frantic, exhausted gaze of a hunted animal, trapped in an inescapable corner. Beneath the woven fabric of his impeccably tailored suit, his biological body was screaming in pure, unadulterated pain. The beloved golden boy of the American entertainment industry was experiencing the debilitating physical symptoms of literal starvation. His empty stomach twisted and contracted, sending sharp waves of cold nausea directly through his nervous system. The mouth-watering smells of the roasted prime meats drifting down the hallway from the dining car were not a pleasant appetizer. They were a cruel, medieval form of psychological torture. Every time a smiling waiter walked briskly past his cabin carrying a heavy tray of steaming food, his mouth dried out, A cold sweat broke across his pale forehead, and his hands began to uncontrollably tremble. When the friendly train conductor stopped by his cabin door to politely ask if the famous star required a warm meal, he had to summon every ounce of his acting ability. He forced a charming smile, utilized his resonant voice, and declined the offer, pretending he simply was not hungry while his internal organs cannibalized themselves. He was a valuable human product, an idol worshipped by millions of families at their breakfast tables every morning. Yet he lacked the basic biological requirement for simple survival. The paralyzing absurdity of his hidden situation defies logical comprehension. He was traveling at high speed toward a promoted red carpet event, where thousands of hysterical fans would soon crush against metal police barricades just to catch a fleeting glimpse of his passing shadow. Studio executives waited at the station to proudly parade him in front of flashing press cameras, utilizing his marketable face to generate millions in instant box office revenue and lucrative merchandise sales. Yet, as he sat alone in that rumbling train cabin, trying to ignore the physical cramps tearing through his abdomen, he slowly reached his trembling right hand into the silk-lined pocket of his custom trousers. He pushed his shaking fingers past the smooth fabric and physically touched the total sum of his available personal wealth. He did not pull out a reassuring wad of high-denomination paper bills. He did not possess a limitless corporate expense account to fall back on. He slowly pulled his trembling hand out of the dark pocket and stared down at his sweating palm. Resting quietly on his skin were a few small, dull metal coins. Exactly 35 cents. That was it. 35 pennies to his legendary bankable name. It was an amount of money so pathetic, so worthless in the face of his national public fame, that it felt like an intentional personal insult from the universe itself. 35 cents could not begin to buy a hot meal in the opulent dining car just a few feet away. It could not buy a stale sandwich at the next brief train stop. It could barely purchase a small black cup of coffee to warm his trembling hands. The crushing psychological realization of that isolated moment was infinitely more painful and damaging than the physical hunger tearing apart his stomach lining. In that luxurious train car, the glittering illusion of his Hollywood existence shattered into a million jagged pieces. He realized with cold clarity that he was not a powerful, untouchable king of the global entertainment industry. He was a powerless, exploited, and disposable prisoner of an unforgiving corporate machine. He possessed the most sought-after face in the United States, a face currently printed on millions of cardboard cereal boxes and towering theatrical posters across the globe. But he did not have enough tangible currency in his own pocket to stop his biological body from starving to death. The suffocating sense of insecurity and helplessness that washed over him on that publicized journey to the glamorous red carpet would permanently scar his soul. It proved that the coveted American dream can often be nothing more than a beautiful, expensive, manufactured mirage, hiding a starving, desperate, and broken reality. 1944 was a year suffocated by the mechanical horrors of global conflict. Young American men bled on foreign beaches, and the grim reality of the Second World War dominated every radio broadcast and newspaper headline across the country. Back on the domestic front, the American public starved for psychological salvation. The velvet-draped movie palaces scattered across the United States did not merely serve as weekend entertainment. They were desperately needed sanctuaries. Inside those cavernous auditoriums, a potent cultural obsession took root in the collective American psyche. The public shifted its desires away from traditional, dialogue-heavy leading men. They hungered for undeniable physical perfection. It was the explosive birth of the American beefcake. The nation craved towering, muscular statues of supreme masculinity, They wanted broad, athletic shoulders and chiseled jawlines to project a comforting aura of invincible strength against the backdrop of a world tearing itself apart. Walking blind into the dead center of this ravenous cultural hunger was a quiet, unassuming young man named Robert Ozell Mosley. If you bumped into Robert on a crowded street in the middle of the war, you would not see a calculating Hollywood star scheming to claw his way to the top of the entertainment hierarchy. He had zero theatrical training. He possessed no powerful industry connections. He harbored no burning desire to stand underneath the harsh heat of studio lights. He was simply a fiercely shy, introverted boy wearing the rough, dark blue wool uniform of the United States Navy. He was a standard military serviceman, accustomed to the unyielding discipline of military life, just trying to do his duty and survive the violent era. He was comfortable disappearing into the anonymous gray ranks of the armed forces. But the universe played a spectacular genetic trick on this quiet sailor. While his internal personality remained reserved, his physical exterior was a staggering masterpiece of human architecture. Robert possessed the precise physical aesthetic that the Hollywood machine was tearing the country apart trying to find. He looked like a mythological Greek deity carved out of solid Californian marble. His symmetrical features, his piercing eyes, and his flawless muscular physique were the breathing embodiment of the ultimate beefcake ideal. He was a walking piece of valuable cinematic real estate, unaware of his own world-conquering visual potential. The Hollywood studio system operates on a ruthless visual radar. It hunts for aesthetic perfection with the unyielding precision of a great white shark smelling fresh blood in the water. It was inevitable that a physical specimen like Robert would not be allowed to fade into the obscure background of the military. He was instantly spotted by industry insiders. He was plucked off the street by the cinematic machine, not for any hidden ability to passionately deliver a Shakespearean monologue, but exclusively because of the breathtaking symmetry of his face. The studio executives did not care that he was painfully shy. They did not care that he had no idea how to hit a taped mark on a soundstage floor or how to project his voice for a microphone. They only saw the raw, marketable visual impact of his face. He was thrust into a minor supporting role. The extent of his on-screen presence was laughably brief. He was not the dramatic leading man carrying the emotional weight of the narrative. He did not have a complex character arc to explore. He was placed in front of the rolling celluloid camera for a grand total of exactly 3 minutes. Just 180 seconds of screen time. In the calculated mathematics of the film industry, a 3-minute supporting appearance by an unknown, uncredited actor is meant to be forgettable background noise. It is meant to be a fleeting shadow that the audience erases from their memory. The second, the scene transitions back to the famous stars. But when the heavy film reels were developed and projected onto the glowing silver screens across the United States, something unprecedented and inexplicable happened in the dark. During those specific 3 minutes, Robert did not just recite his minimal dialogue. He hypnotized the entire nation. The camera lens worshipped him. It amplified his quiet vulnerability and his towering physical masculinity, broadcasting it directly into the dark theaters like a potent visual narcotic. The audience, comprised of millions of Americans seeking a brief escape from the anxieties of the global war, was paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of his physical beauty. It was an electric connection that bypassed logic and went straight to a primal obsession. The immediate aftermath of that single 3-minute cinematic appearance defied rational logic and shattered standard industry expectations. It triggered a cultural earthquake that shook the very foundations of the studio system. In the mid-20th century, long before the instantaneous validation of modern internet social media. The undeniable metric of true, organic public obsession was the handwritten letter. The American fan mail culture was an organized, passionate physical undertaking. Fans sat at their wooden desks, pouring their fervent adoration onto paper, placing it in a stamped envelope, and sending it blindly into the vast Hollywood machinery. For decades, the powerful studios measured the exact financial worth of their contracted stars by carefully weighing the canvas sacks of mail delivered to their lots every morning. When the movie featuring the handsome sailor released, the postal system in Southern California practically collapsed under the staggering volume of incoming paper. The studio mailrooms were inundated. They were not receiving a few dozen polite letters of respectful appreciation. They were hit by a roaring tsunami of raw human adoration. Tens of thousands of passionate, perfumed, frantically written letters began pouring into the studio offices every week, overwhelming the clerical staff. The postal workers physically groaned under the heavy weight of the canvas sacks. The letters came from every corner of the vast American landscape. They came from young, wide-eyed teenage girls living in isolated Midwestern farming towns. And they came from sophisticated housewives residing in bustling East Coast metropolitan cities. They all simultaneously demanded the same thing. They ravenously wanted to know everything about the beautiful boy in the pristine sailor uniform. They wanted glossy pictures. They demanded more screen time. And they were obsessed with a man whose real name they did not even know yet. He was a mystery, a flawless visual canvas upon which an entire nation of women projected their romantic fantasies. In the span of just 180 seconds of cinematic exposure, Robert Ozell Mosley had accidentally conquered the world. He walked onto a loud movie set as an anonymous military serviceman, and walked off as an unstoppable national phenomenon. The studio executives stared at the impossible mountains of fan mail stacking up in their hallways, overwhelmed by the undeniable power of what they had unleashed upon the public. It was the golden manifestation of the ultimate Hollywood Cinderella story. A quiet boy transformed into a literal cultural god overnight, based on the unyielding geometry of his face. The blinding rocket ship of fame launched, carrying the unprepared, naive sailor directly toward a sun-drenched stratosphere, unaware of the heavy chains being forged in the dark background. That single moment in the dark theater was merely the ignition switch for a larger cultural phenomenon. As the turbulent 1940s gave way to the prosperous 1950s, the quiet sailor shed his anonymous past and officially evolved into Guy Madison, a titan of American pop culture. The studio machinery did not simply release movies featuring him. They engineered an inescapable multimedia empire centered around his chiseled jawline. This was the lucrative golden age of television, and Madison was perfectly positioned to dominate the expanding domestic broadcast market. He was cast as the uncompromising frontier hero in the popular television series, The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok. This was not a minor, late-night program. It was a monolithic, weekly cultural event that firmly cemented his status as the undisputed national idol. Every week, millions of American families religiously gathered around their glowing television sets, captivated by his commanding presence. He possessed a rare visual duality the American public adored. A distinctly masculine jawline contrasted with gentle, reassuring eyes. He was the flawless physical manifestation of righteous frontier justice and comforting moral certainty. The sheer magnitude of his cultural dominance transcended the physical boundaries of the television screen. In the competitive landscape of 1950s American consumerism, true celebrity power was not strictly measured by box office receipts or television ratings. The most coveted metric of a star's genuine influence was their ability to physically infiltrate the daily domestic routine of the average household, and no one infiltrated the American home quite like Guy Madison. His universally trusted face was utilized to sell a massive volume of retail merchandise. The defining pinnacle of this commercial exploitation was his lucrative partnership with the Kellogg Company. His rugged likeness was printed on millions of brightly colored cardboard boxes of Kellogg's Sugar Corn Pops. This was an unprecedented level of visual saturation. Every morning, in busy kitchens stretching from populated East Coast cities to quiet western suburbs, his face sat directly on the breakfast table. He was the first thing millions of impressionable children saw when they woke up, and the last face they looked at before heading off to school. He was no longer just an actor playing a cowboy on television. He transformed into a trusted, familiar member of the American family unit. The corporate executives at Kellogg recognized that his reassuring smile possessed the power to move millions of units of product on the sheer strength of his personal brand alone. The commercial onslaught did not stop at the breakfast table. The entire country was saturated with his image. His famous face was stamped onto an endless array of children's toys, cheap plastic six-shooters, and brightly colored cowboy hats. Retail stores displayed his promotional cardboard cutouts in their front windows. Millions of young children eagerly traded coveted chewing gum cards bearing his exact likeness in schoolyards across the nation. His name and aesthetic were weaponized by corporate entities to dominate the lucrative youth consumer market. He achieved a level of profitable fame that defies modern comprehension. He was inescapable. He was the undisputed king of the American cultural landscape, a universally adored figure whose image wove directly into the fabric of the 1950s American experience. The bright lights of his commercial empire seemed invincible, masking the treacherous financial forces moving in the shadows, quietly preparing to dismantle his glittering universe piece by piece. The smiling face plastered across millions of cheerful breakfast tables was a masterfully constructed corporate illusion. The American public genuinely believed they worshipped a fiercely independent, autonomous frontier hero. They believed the man looking back at them from the cereal box was the living embodiment of the uncompromising American spirit. In brutal reality, the man they idolized did not actually exist. He was a manufactured phantom, a powerless hostage trapped deep within the labyrinth of a predatory industry. The golden era of Hollywood operated on a strict, oppressive hierarchy. It was a ruthless, unregulated system where naive, attractive young men arriving from quiet provinces were stripped of their fundamental human dignity. They were transformed into obedient, disposable commodities by powerful men operating quietly in the smoke-filled shadows of the studio back rooms. At the center of this suffocating web sat a man named Henry Wilson. Wilson was not a standard talent agent trying to secure auditions for his clients. He was a notorious Hollywood power broker, a brilliant but exploitative architect who specialized in manufacturing male stars from the ground up. When the quiet Navy sailor fell into his calculating orbit, the first thing Wilson permanently dismantled was the young man's actual, God-given identity. The name Robert Ozell Mosley was erased from existence in a matter of seconds. Wilson deemed the name too ordinary, too soft for the explosive cinematic product he was designing. He forcibly rebranded the young sailor, stamping him with a sharp, rugged corporate moniker. He officially birthed Guy Madison. This was not a simple stage name adopted for theatrical flair. It was a hostile corporate takeover of a living human soul. From that moment forward, Wilson dictated every microscopic aspect of his daily existence with tyrannical precision. The young man lost the fundamental human right to make his own choices. Wilson policed his posture, corrected his natural vocabulary, and governed his public manners. Recognizing with cold clarity that Madison's true financial value lay exclusively in his physical beauty, Wilson forced the modest young man into a relentless series of exploitative photo shoots. The military man was ordered to strip off his shirt for the flashing cameras. His oiled, meticulously sculpted torso was photographed from every provocative angle, designed to feed the insatiable hunger of the lucrative beefcake industry. He was paraded around the studio lots like a mute, prize-winning stallion at a livestock auction, stripped of his personal dignity and reduced to a profitable piece of marketed flesh. The suffocating manipulation ran deep, poisoning the most intimate corners of his personal life, culminating in a devastating financial betrayal that permanently destroyed his future. In the rigidly conservative, scrutinized cultural landscape of the 1950s, a globally recognized male heartthrob required a pristine public image. Wilson orchestrated Madison's entire romantic existence with mechanical precision. The powerful agent arranged high-profile, fabricated public dates with beautiful starlets, forcefully engineering publicized romantic relationships and meticulously arranging marriages solely to generate wholesome magazine headlines. It was a coordinated public relations shield, designed to protect the illusion of the ultimate American bachelor. Madison was a terrified prisoner securely locked inside his own flawless skin, unable to make an independent choice about who to love or how to speak, without his tyrannical agent's explicit authorization. However, controlling his romantic life and public image was merely the surface-level deception. The catastrophic crime committed by Henry Wilson was a sophisticated, ruthless financial exploitation that drained Madison dry. Wilson was not just managing his client's career. He assumed unquestioned control over Madison's multi-million-dollar earnings. The agent convinced the naive, trusting actor to sign away his financial autonomy, granting Wilson the legal power of attorney to handle all investments, tax filings, and banking accounts. Madison, overwhelmed by the blinding speed of his own superstardom, blindly trusted the man who built him. This blind trust was a fatal, irreversible error. Behind the locked doors of the agency, Wilson systematically embezzled staggering amounts of Madison's hard-earned wealth. He siphoned off the cereal box royalties, the lucrative television syndication checks, and the massive movie salaries, funneling the money directly into his own corrupt, extravagant lifestyle, while hiding the catastrophic reality from his client. How does a multi-million-dollar fortune vanish without a single bank teller, studio accountant, or corporate lawyer noticing the discrepancy? The mathematics of his ruin point to a much larger, insidious conspiracy. Hollywood historians and forensic accountants have long debated the mechanics of this financial hemorrhage. The first chilling theory points directly to the towering studio executives. A commercial empire of this magnitude requires legions of corporate auditors and tax experts. It is a mathematical impossibility for that level of wealth to disappear without the studio bosses noticing. They saw the missing funds, they noticed the empty ledgers, and they chose silence. In the ruthless calculus of the golden era, a wealthy, financially independent actor is a dangerous liability. A star with a full bank account can refuse terrible scripts. They can demand better working conditions. But a star drowning in invisible debt? That star is an obedient, desperate indentured servant. By allowing Wilson to bleed Madison dry, the studios guaranteed their golden boy would never possess the financial leverage to walk away from the assembly line. The second, far darker hypothesis dives into the terrifying underworld of mid-century Hollywood blackmail. Henry Wilson was notorious for maintaining the pristine public images of his clients through any means necessary. In the puritanical climate of the 1950s, Keeping a stable of manipulated actors out of the ruthless tabloid magazines required vast sums of untraceable cash. The missing cereal box royalties did not just fund Wilson's lavish lifestyle. Dark industry rumors suggest Madison's fortune was repurposed as hush money. His hard-earned wealth was allegedly funneled into unmarked envelopes, handed directly to mob-connected fixers, corrupt journalists, and local police officers to kill scandalous stories before they reached the printing presses. Wilson was purchasing secrets. Madison was unknowingly financing the very shadow economy that kept him trapped in his own glittering cage. The zenith of this financial betrayal detonated like a hidden landmine when the Internal Revenue Service came knocking. When the fragile financial house of cards finally collapsed, the true villains of this conspiracy slipped seamlessly into the shadows. Because Wilson deliberately failed to pay Madison's federal taxes for years, while simultaneously looting his accounts, the actor suddenly found himself responsible for an insurmountable mountain of federal tax debt. The federal government did not launch a criminal probe into the complicit studio accountants. They did not pursue the underworld fixers or the corrupt talent agent. The IRS required a prominent, visible target to make a public example. They chose the smiling face on the billboard. Guy Madison became the ultimate defenseless scapegoat. The unassuming Navy sailor who simply wanted to serve his country had been swallowed whole by a predatory machine. He was trapped in the most glamorous hostage situation on the planet. He was manipulated by a man who viewed him as property and forced to perform a smiling pantomime for the adoring American public, while his actual soul was crushed and his financial future stolen out from under him. The Internal Revenue Service does not care about manipulative agents or shadow economies. They only care about cold, hard cash. And the ultimate American golden boy was about to discover that he had nothing left to his name. Time is the most ruthless, undefeated predator operating within the toxic ecosystem of the Hollywood machine. It cannot be negotiated with, it cannot be bought with box office receipts, and it silently hunts down every manufactured idol. While the towering corporate billboards proudly displayed an immortal, eternally youthful cowboy for the public to worship, the breathing human being trapped beneath the crushing weight of that pristine cardboard image experienced a catastrophic, simultaneous collapse on multiple fronts. The spectacular public facade began to fracture, revealing an agonizing domestic nightmare and a cold financial reality that no amount of studio public relations could mask. The Golden Boy rapidly approached his expiration date, and the subsequent fall was swift and merciless. The personal sanctuary, the quiet home life traditionally supposed to offer a safe refuge from the blinding flashbulbs and the demands of global fame, was instead a suffocating theater of human tragedy. His publicized first marriage was not a glamorous Hollywood fairy tale. He married the beautiful, talented, yet troubled actress Gail Russell. Behind the locked wooden doors of their Los Angeles home, far away from the adoring eyes of the public, Russell fought a terrifying losing battle against chronic alcoholism. The insidious grip of chemical dependency tore their marriage apart from the inside out, devastating their private domestic world. Her agonizing downward spiral was public, humiliating and painful to witness, ultimately culminating in a tragic, lonely, and premature death that left a permanent emotional scar on his psyche. As the heavy walls of his domestic life caved in around him, the unrelenting stress consumed his desperate attempts at finding personal stability, right when he needed a supportive emotional anchor the most. His second marriage rapidly deteriorated, ending in a bitter, stressful divorce that stripped away his final shred of personal sanctuary. He stood alone in the silent, echoing wreckage of his own private life, watching his family structure disintegrate into dust. But the American entertainment industry does not pause its grinding gears to allow a broken man to quietly mourn his shattered family. The studio system operates on a fiercely rigid cultural religion, the fanatical worship of flawless, untouched youth. In this toxic, hypervisual American culture, physical aging is not viewed as a natural, biological process or an accumulation of respectable human wisdom. It is treated as an unforgivable, terminal disease. As the calendar pages ruthlessly flipped forward and Guy Madison officially approached the daunting threshold of his 40th birthday, the irreversible biological shifts physically manifested. The impossibly smooth, boyish skin that successfully sold millions of boxes of breakfast cereal and captivated a generation began to show the undeniable physical toll of constant professional stress, emotional trauma, and the unavoidable reality of gravity. The razor-sharp aesthetic that once paralyzed a nation of moviegoers was slowly fading into the background. He was no longer the fresh-faced, innocent young sailor who accidentally conquered the globe. He was a visibly aging man carrying the scars of a turbulent existence. This is the terrifying moment where the inescapable trap of being a manufactured beefcake snaps shut with a bone-crushing force. When a Hollywood star naturally ages out of their pristine, youthful, physical beauty, they must rely on raw, cultivated acting talent to transition into complex, mature character roles. But the harsh, humiliating reality of Madison's cinematic career was undeniable, and it was suddenly placed under an unforgiving microscope. He had never been hired for his theatrical depth. He had never been formally trained to deliver complex emotional nuances, command a theatrical stage, or carry the dramatic weight of a serious cinematic masterpiece. He was a breathtakingly beautiful physical prop, elevated by a corporate machine based entirely on his genetics. When the flawless physical shell began to naturally weather, there was no underlying foundation of elite theatrical skill to support the collapsing structure. His restricted, limited acting range, which had been easily forgiven and ignored when he was 25, was violently exposed under the harsh scrutiny of the changing cinematic landscape. The audience, demanding fresh, compelling performances, simply stopped showing up. The sudden expulsion from the Hollywood elite is a silent, terrifying phenomenon. There is no grand termination meeting. There is no respectful retirement ceremony to honor past contributions. The towering studio executives simply look at the aging face on the screen, look at the limited acting resume, and make a cold, emotionless, sociopathic financial calculation. He officially reached his corporate expiration date. The industry squeezed the final, profitable drop of youthful charisma from his physical body, effectively draining him dry, and threw the empty, exhausted rind directly into the cultural trash bin. The lucrative studio contracts that defined his entire adult life vanished overnight. The telephone in his sprawling, empty house stopped ringing. The very same powerful industry producers, directors, and casting agents who once begged for his presence on their red carpets and flooded his mailbox with offers, now refused to return his calls. He was methodically erased from the elite Hollywood call sheets, replaced instantly by the next wave of flawless 20-something boys waiting eagerly in the wings. The psychological devastation of this simultaneous collapse is unfathomable. He was a man stripped of his emotional family anchors, discarded by his chosen profession, and exiled from the glittering, exclusive social circles that proudly crowned him king. Compounding this misery was the staggering reality of the massive tax debt orchestrated by his former manager. The Internal Revenue Service aggressively moved in, ruthlessly seizing his luxurious estates, freezing his remaining bank accounts, and systematically dismantling his accumulated fortune to satisfy the multi-million-dollar deficit. The intoxicating spotlight that fiercely illuminated his existence was abruptly switched off, leaving him bankrupt and alone in the sudden dark. He was a broken, aging artifact of a bygone era, wandering blindly through the depressing wreckage of his own magnificent myth, searching for a way to simply survive the devastating aftermath of his own manufactured success. The heavy iron gates of the major California studios did not just slowly close, they slammed shut and locked permanently from the inside. By the time the calendar flipped to the year 1960, the brutal, unforgiving reality of his new existence firmly settled into the dusty Los Angeles pavement. The American entertainment industry severed all professional ties. There were no more lucrative television contracts waiting on his desk. There were no more corporate sponsorships, and his famous fading face was scrubbed from the brightly colored breakfast cereal boxes in grocery stores across the nation. He was a discarded ghost haunting his own hometown, paralyzed by a terrifying financial vacuum created by the IRS. When the highest echelons of your own country's cultural machinery reject you, and the threat of destitution breathes down your neck, you are forced to look for salvation far beyond your own borders. With his back pressed against a cold brick wall, the former undisputed king of the American frontier packed whatever meager belongings he had left, purchased a one-way ticket across the Atlantic Ocean, and initiated a grueling, agonizingly long European exile that would consume more than a decade of his life. In the elitist, arrogant hierarchy of the mid-century American studio system, booking a flight to Rome, Italy, to shoot a movie was not considered a glorious international expansion of an actor's brand. The American media and the powerful Los Angeles executives viewed the rapidly growing European film industry with unfiltered, cruel disdain. In the rigid social circles of Beverly Hills, Europe was universally mocked and categorized as the ultimate cinematic refugee camp. It was the designated, embarrassing dumping ground where the ruthless Hollywood machine quietly shipped its aging, discarded, and financially ruined human commodities. Going to Italy was considered the undeniable kiss of death for a legitimate acting career. It was a humiliating public admission of professional defeat, signaling to the world that you were officially washed up, desperate, and willing to sell your last remaining shred of artistic dignity just to keep the lights on. This was the toxic, humiliating psychological environment Guy Madison willingly walked into. The geographical shift was jarring, stripping away the polished, meticulously controlled corporate infrastructure that protected his entire career. He traded the manicured, pristine lawns of Southern California for the chaotic, dusty, fiercely independent backlots of Cinecittà Studios in Rome. He was at the mercy of foreign producers who did not view him as a revered national idol, but simply as a recognizable American face they could exploit to sell international theater tickets. The most agonizing, ironic consequence of this forced international relocation was his total immersion into the controversial, exploding genre of the spaghetti western. To grasp the profound psychological whiplash of this specific career move, you must look at what he used to represent. Guy Madison was the man who previously defined the pristine pinnacle of the American cowboy aesthetic. He was the squeaky clean star of The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok. But the Italian spaghetti western was considered by American critics to be a cheap, hastily assembled, counterfeit imitation of the sacred American frontier mythology. He was forced to stand in the blistering, suffocating heat of a dusty Spanish desert, surrounded by Italian and Spanish crew members shouting chaotic stage directions in languages he could barely understand, pretending to be somewhere in Texas. He wore cheap, poorly tailored costumes, shooting violent, morally ambiguous scenes with visibly low production values. He participated in the cheap counterfeiting of the exact classic American genre that originally made him a multimillionaire. It was a profound, daily, visceral humiliation, stripping him of the corporate machinery that defined his existence. He was no longer the shining hero of the American West. He was a desperate expatriate, sweating through a cheap leather vest in the Mediterranean sun, separated from his home country. But as the terrifying 1960s dragged on, the blinding desperation for a consistent paycheck accelerated. The looming threat of the IRS seizing whatever foreign income he managed to scrape together forced him to work relentlessly. He simply could not afford the basic luxury of artistic integrity or meticulous script approval. If a foreign film producer offered him a handful of cash, he blindly signed the contract without hesitation. He was shoved directly into a chaotic, dizzying blender of low-budget European exploitation cinema. He strapped on uncomfortable leather sandals and wielded plastic swords to fight in generic sword and sandal historical epics, trying to project ancient Roman authority while navigating terrible, mismatched dubbing. The horrifying rock bottom of this cinematic overseas purgatory, however, manifested in the truly bizarre, absurd, and almost hallucinatory projects he ultimately accepted just to survive the month. He found himself anchoring a strange, nonsensical, comedic western titled Bang Bang Kid, a film so detached from reality it felt like a mockery of his entire past career. But the scripts only grew darker, cheaper, and infinitely more chaotic. The shy, modest Navy sailor who was once forbidden from stepping out of line by his American handlers was plunged into the mind-bending psychedelic exploitation genre of the late 60s. He participated in films with titles that sounded like terrifying fever dreams, most notably the bizarre, unhinged picture LSD Flesh of Devil. The staggering visual contrast is heartbreaking. The man who used to smile warmly and safely at innocent American children over their morning bowls of Kellogg's sugar corn pops wandered through cheap, surreal, drug-fueled European exploitation films, unrecognizable from his former golden self. He navigated a chaotic maze of terrible special effects, nonsensical dialogue, and exploited European actresses. He spent over a grueling, exhausting decade permanently trapped inside this overseas purgatory. He systematically churned out disposable, forgotten B-movie trash, willingly trading the fading remnants of his global dignity for the simple, desperate ability to secure a modest daily paycheck in a foreign land. He was a fallen star, burning out slowly in the dark, thousands of miles away from the bright Los Angeles spotlight that originally birthed him. The Hollywood history books are filled with the tragic, depressing obituaries of fallen golden boys. When the blinding studio spotlight finally clicks off, and the crushing weight of public irrelevance sets in, countless discarded idols choose a fast, violent, and permanent exit. The elite graveyards of Southern California are packed with formerly famous men who drowned their bruised egos in heavy bottles of expensive liquor, surrendered to the isolating darkness of severe clinical depression, or simply could not survive the deafening silence of a disconnected telephone. Guy Madison found himself standing alone, staring directly down into that exact same pitch-black abyss of total professional and financial ruin. The powerful urge to just give up, to let the crushing waves of federal tax debt and Hollywood betrayal pull him under, must have been overwhelming. But he refused to jump. Instead of writing a pathetic, tear-soaked surrender note to a public that had already forgotten him, he stubbornly rolled up his sleeves, firmly gritted his teeth, and chose the most agonizing, grueling, and humbling path available. He chose to survive. The undeniable core of the celebrated American spirit is not defined by unearned, inherited luxury, and it is not measured by manufactured corporate fame. It is defined by raw, unflinching, calloused resilience. It is the primal biological instinct to keep breathing, keep fighting, and keep moving forward, even when the known universe has knocked you face first into the mud. Madison tapped directly into that ancient, unbreakable, and proud survival instinct. Stripped of his powerful Hollywood publicists, his luxurious Los Angeles mansions, and his flawless, youthful ego, he regressed back to his disciplined military roots. He stopped viewing himself as a persecuted cinematic deity, a victim of a cruel industry, and simply embraced the harsh, grounding reality of a blue-collar working man. The dusty, blistering hot film sets of Southern Europe were no longer a humiliating exile. They became his daily, grinding factory floor. He showed up to the foreign sets early. He never complained about the suffocating Mediterranean heat, the terrible catering, or the microscopic production budgets that forced him to perform his own dangerous physical stunts. He simply put his head down, ignored the pain of his bruised pride, and poured every ounce of his remaining physical energy into the grueling manual labor of acting for pure financial survival. There is a profound, undeniable dignity in honest, uncomplaining hard work that transcends complicated language barriers and geographical borders. The hard-bitten, cynical European film crews who initially rolled their eyes at the arrival of yet another washed-up American pretty boy looking for a quick paycheck, slowly noticed his relentless professional work ethic. He was not throwing childish temper tantrums inside an air-conditioned star trailer. He bled in the dirt right alongside the exhausted camera operators and the local background extras. This grueling, decade-long international crucible forged a new, infinitely more complex and fascinating human being. The soft, manicured, smooth beefcake aesthetic of his youth was burned away by the harsh, relentless sun, revealing a weathered, rugged, and genuinely compelling masculine presence. His eyes no longer held the innocent, gentle gaze printed on millions of breakfast cereal boxes. They held the heavy, hardened, and dangerous stare of a man who lost everything and somehow managed to survive the wreckage. This internal and external transformation finally manifested in vastly superior, respected cinematic output that demanded global attention. When he eventually stepped into the leading role of the gritty, somber, and stylized Western Reverend's Colt, he was no longer relying on a manufactured corporate smile to carry the narrative weight. He carried the heavy, authentic, and unfakeable aura of a man who actually survived a brutal journey through personal and financial hell. He delivered a grounded, authentic, and respected dramatic performance that commanded genuine artistic respect from the very same cynical international critics who previously dismissed him as a cheap commodity. He proved, on a global scale, that a man's true, enduring value is never measured by the flawless geometry of his jawline or the volume of his teenage fan mail, but by the undeniable, unbreakable strength of his spine when pushed to the absolute brink. For 10 long, agonizing years, he fought a silent, desperately lonely war of financial attrition across the European continent. He saved every wrinkled, hard-earned foreign banknote, slowly, methodically, and painfully digging his way out of the suffocating mountain of federal tax debt his manipulative former handler dropped on his shoulders. He did not ask the American public for a charity bailout. He did not sell cheap, salacious tabloid stories about his famous former lovers to make a quick buck. He paid for his own freedom with his own blood and sweat. And then the calendar officially turned to the year 1970. A different, transformed man stood at the busy international terminal, preparing to cross the vast Atlantic Ocean one final time. Guy Madison booked a commercial flight back to the United States of America. He did not return as a defeated, pathetic, broken exile begging the wealthy Hollywood executives for a meager handout. He walked off that airplane and stepped back onto American soil, with his broad shoulders squared and his head held high. he faced the most terrifying, destructive forces the entertainment industry could unleash. He stared down financial ruin, and he outlasted them all. He stood as a towering, living testament to the power of human endurance, quietly proving that while the Hollywood machine can easily manufacture a temporary idol in a matter of minutes, it takes a genuine, unyielding crucible of fire to forge a truly unbreakable man. The Hollywood machine is a relentless, predatory furnace that uses flawless human beauty as its primary combustible fuel. It purposefully seeks out naive youth, drains them of their fundamental autonomy, and discards the empty husks the second the visual magic fades. The sprawling saga of Guy Madison is the definitive cautionary tale of this dark corporate consumption. His perfect, statuesque features miraculously handed him the keys to the American kingdom, transforming a quiet sailor into a universally worshipped national deity. But that exact same breathtaking physical beauty condemned him to an agonizing existence as a tightly controlled puppet. He was a shiny, hollow commodity manipulated by ruthless talent agents, and ultimately left bankrupt, physically starving on a luxury train, while his famous face smiled brightly from millions of breakfast tables across the country. Yet, the most profound, poetic twist of his turbulent existence is the exact location where he finally discovered actual liberation. Genuine freedom did not exist anywhere near the blinding, glamorous spotlight of his peak 1950s fame. It was not found inside the guarded gates of a massive studio lot, and it certainly was not present inside the suffocating confines of a Beverly Hills mansion. True, unfiltered human dignity was violently clawed back in the blistering, unforgiving dirt of his European cinematic exile. By shedding the heavy, toxic armor of the manufactured American beefcake and embracing the grueling sweat of a discarded, blue-collar working actor churning out cheap foreign films, he quietly reclaimed his own stolen soul. He paid off his IRS debts entirely with his own labor, stripping away the hollow illusion to finally stand as his own man. He proved, with absolute finality, that while a flawless face can easily buy you temporary global worship, only raw, unyielding personal resilience can successfully buy back your own life. The applause faded long ago, leaving behind only unpaid debts and shattered lives. What are your thoughts on the harsh lives behind the fame? Leave a comment below. If you like this video, hit subscribe to join us behind the scenes of Hidden Legends. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.